Ladies and gentlemen, what happens if a shot doesn't look all that great? Well, we let there be RGB lights. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another review. I've very recently gotten my hands on a couple of RGB lights. They look great, not just on me, but for photography in general. So today, let's take a little bit of time to talk about them. Today's video will cover two lights. They are both from a brand called Ulanzi, and they are as follows. They are the VL15 RGB and the VL49 RGB. Now, you may be asking yourselves, why are we doing, two reviews in one video? The reason for this is simple. It's just that these two lights are often listed together in online stores, which basically is them begging to be compared. At the beginning, I had a hard time choosing as well. In fact, I ended up getting both just to try them out. And yeah, these are my thoughts. So here's how we're going to do things today. I'm going to start by talking about just each one of these lights on their own, what they look like, how they work, and just the general unboxing experience. Then we're going to jump into the actual review side of things, where I actually take a close look at these lights, compare them against each other, and tell you about their pros and cons. I'll even compare this to another light that I've been using for a very long time, and we'll try and get a feel of whether that can actually fit well in your arsenal of filmmaking tools. This will of course lead us up to our final wrap-up, where I talk about whether you should or should not buy them. So that's what I wanted to cover today. If you've wanted to jump ahead, well, pop open the video description or look on the seek bar. You will find timestamps in both these places. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. First things first, if you're gonna get these lights, a word of warning. The VL49 in particular has a non-RGB version. The version shown on screen here is just a white light. So we're talking about the RGB one in today's video. Just take note of that. So with that said, let's talk about the Ulanzi VL15, the one that's giving me a nice little purple underglow. Sounds a little bit weird when you talk about that in the context of a human, but let's move on. In the box, you get a light, you get a little silicone case that acts as a diffuser, and you also get a USB-C cable for charging. Going around the light itself, there are a few points of note. There is a cold shoe and 1/4-inch jack at the bottom, so that's great for mounting in a variety of ways. On the sides, you have a single button control and a USB-C charging port. At the top, you have a cold shoe receptacle, so you can attach other cold shoe components to it. And at the back, there is a 4 LED power indicator. That's basically everything you get on this light. So not very complex, and that actually reflects in how it works. You only have a single button to operate the entire light. So well, pressing and holding it turns it on or off. Pressing that button with a short press changes its color. It's RGB after all, so pressing that button cycles you through 9 possible settings. 8 of them are static colors, the colors of the rainbow, so to speak. And the last one is an animated mode where, well, it just sweeps through the entire RGB spectrum. The technical specifications of this light can be seen on screen. As you can see, it's tiny, it's extremely light, and yeah, that makes it incredibly portable. When it comes down to the battery capacity, it's officially listed as 750 mAh. The official timing given is 1 hour of use, though I've been able to push it a little bit further to about 85 minutes on the cyan setting. So now that you're familiar with, well, what kind of device it is, let's talk price. As of the time of recording, the list price of this product on the official web page is $10 US. Of course, I bought it on Shopee through a reseller, so I got it a little bit cheaper. So yeah, a nifty little product for not a lot of money at all. Now let's move on to the second contender for the day, which is the VL49. This is the light that has been giving me a cyan cast from the side, and yeah, it's a slightly larger one with a few more buttons and controls at the back. In the box itself, we don't get very much, just the light and a charging cable. Looking around the device, you're not going to find very much along the sides and the top because, well, 3 of those sides are reserved for cold shoe receptacles. That's cool because you can attach a ton of stuff to it. At the bottom, you have the same cold shoe base with a 1/4-inch jack, but the back is where the magic is. The VL49 comes with an LED screen to let you see what's going on, 3 buttons for you to change the current state as well as to, well, dial in parameters, a slide switch for power, a USB-C charging jack, and a magnet mount, so you can actually mount this to, well, any surface that's magnetic. Here's me putting it on my fridge for fun. Here's how the controls work. You have a function button which allows you to toggle between several different modes on the light. If you long press, you are switching between CCT and RGB modes, that is, color calibrated temperature versus red, green, blue modes. Within each mode, you can adjust the color and the brightness to your liking using the left and right buttons that are there. And basically, here's how the two modes work. In RGB mode, you get to set the hue, which is expressed as a number between 0 and 360 degrees. Whereas in the color calibrated temperature or CCT mode, well, you get to dial in a color temperature, from very warm colors at 2500 kelvins all the way to cooler colors at 9000 kelvins. So this is meant to be a white light mode that you can sort of adjust the color temperature for. In both modes, you can set the brightness from anywhere between 0 to 100%. In terms of the device's technical specs, you can see them on screen. It's slightly larger than a VL15, not by much, and there's actually no official weight given, which is a little bit strange. Well, no matter, I took a kitchen scale, put it on, and it came up to about 100 grams. So still not any less portable than the VL15. However, there are some significant gains, namely when it comes to the battery capacity, which now tops out at 2000 mAh. In my normal use case with Zoom calls, that was able to last an entire day, over 6.5 hours with 1 bar of battery left. But here's something interesting that I spotted in the manual that I didn't actually give much thought to at the beginning, and that is the LEDs that were actually available in this light. It said there were 20 RGB LEDs, 20 white, and 20 yellow. And that's an interesting thought. But we'll come to that later on. For now, let's talk price. The official list price for this light is about $20 US, though again, if you're getting it from resellers, you can get it a fair bit cheaper. I got mine for about $13 US, and this puts it very close to the VL15, which again is another point of contention when it comes to choosing which light you actually want. So now that we're familiar with both these lights, let's take a closer look at their pros and cons, how they are similar to each other, how they stack up against each other, so that you can make a better informed decision about which one works better for you. So let's start with the pros of both lights. First things first, these two lights are affordable. I've been in the market for a video light for quite a while now, and these are the ones I settled on because, well, they are sorta cheaper. It's not easy to find video lights at this price, especially if RGB is involved, so I'm pretty happy I got these. Here's another thing I really loved about them, and that is the fact that they have their batteries built in with USB-C charging. That means I don't have to worry about, well, swapping out batteries and charging them separately. That light is everything I need to get going. Next up is their mounting options. You could mount this on a camera, you can mount this on a tripod. In fact, I got a couple of mini tripods that work really well for this. So yeah, it makes them very versatile, very easy to mount and deploy. And this is especially important for the VL15, which has, well, less battery capacity. You can use them and charge them at the same time. I have lights that rely on external batteries. Well, you couldn't do that for those because there is of course no charging circuit built in. If you have something like a power bank, you could potentially use one of these lights indefinitely, at least until your power bank also runs out. Of course, positives aside, there are also some negatives that you need to think about. The fact that the batteries are built in is a pro, of course, but it can also be a con, in that, well, batteries don't last forever. Even if you take really good care of them, they'll degrade over time. For a device like this, if the battery is dead, the whole thing is kinda dead. I mean, I guess you could plug it into a power bank and keep it going that way, but the portable aspect, which is what makes these so compelling, yeah, that sort of disappears away, so you need to take note of that. I don't know how easy it is to get these fixed. They have a 1-year warranty, but who knows when the battery is going to die on you. If it's further on down the line, is it more worth to take it apart and fix the battery, or just to get a new one? Well, that remains to be answered. Next, these are not flashlights for photography. They will not synchronize to your camera's shutter. They are meant to be video lights that are either on all the time or off. So do bear that in mind. And finally, these aren't really quick to set up. Unfortunately, they're slightly fiddly. The VL15 is a little bit easier because there's just one big button, but you gotta press and hold, it takes a while. The VL49 is not too difficult to switch on, but if you're gonna change colors, yeah, it's gonna take a while. So it's not really something that you can easily operate on the fly. Do take note of that. Build quality is an area with seemingly the most number of compromises. Both devices are made almost entirely out of plastic, and you can see some sloppiness in the assembly. From the side button on the VL15 getting stuck from time to time if you press it at an off angle, to the oddly slanted display on the VL49. I also want to take a moment to compare these lights to the more analog lights, if that makes sense. That is of course your basic lights where you just put in a battery, there are no electronics in it, you power it up and the LEDs come on, like this light that I have. Again, there are some pros and cons when you compare them to each other. What's nice about these lights, which I will consider them to be digital because they have electronics involved, well, they're RGB built right in, you can change the colors and whatever by just pressing buttons. You can still change colors with an analog light, you just need to use gels. In fact, I'm using one right now with the light you've seen. It's a little orange plate that slides over the top. So not exactly the most intuitive way of doing things, but in a way, yeah, these products are comparable because you can still get colored lights out of just a basic analog light. Of course, there are disadvantages as well. These RGB lights with electronics in them, you would expect them to be pricier, you would expect their lifespan to potentially be shorter because there are more things that could break down. And one thing I've realized is that, well, with an analog light, you could just put in a battery, turn it all the way up. Yeah, it would absolutely guzzle that battery, but you do get a lot of brightness. That's why I'm using it as my key light in the scene here. It is still the brightest light in my entire arsenal. Of course, that may not be a very fair comparison because, well, obviously there are so many more LEDs on my bigger light. But yeah, the thing is, they cost about the same. Let's talk more differences. The control schemes are obviously very different, and this will result in a very different operating experience. As we've briefly alluded to previously, the VL15 is easier to work with because it's just one big button. I find that in Zoom calls, if I ever needed to, well, make some tweaks or whatever, I could just reach over without taking my focus away from what I was doing in the moment to tweak up the light. You couldn't really do that for the VL49 because, yeah, you kind of need to look at a screen to sort of see what state you are in at any given moment. Of course, there are compromises here as well. Because of the simpler control scheme, the VL15 really doesn't let you control a lot of things. You can't even change the intensity or the brightness of the lights. You can just, sort of switch through the presets. You can do much more with the VL49. There are also, of course, differences when it comes to mounting options. The VL15 is, of course, more limited because, well, it has one cold shoe mount, one receptacle, and that's it. The VL49 has quite a few more mounting points, and what I like about it is also the magnetic attachment. Assuming that you can find a surface to attach it to, you don't even need to bring a tripod, and I thought that was pretty cool. There are also some differences when it comes to the LED layout. The VL15 has, well, 15 RGB LEDs. That's it. If you want white light, then all the RGB LEDs have all the red, green, and blue components switched on to give you white light. You can sort of see, if you look at it carefully, that yeah, it's actually a blend of red, green, and blue. Of course, the actual light being cast by it is not noticeably worse, but I don't know if, in more professional situations, whether that makes a difference or not. The VL49, on the other hand, has dedicated white and yellow LEDs, so you should not have this problem. Of course, this also raises some interesting points. If you sort of turn the intensity down on the VL49 and took a close look at how the LEDs are laid out, you notice something interesting. Yeah, the LEDs are actually all separated apart, and yeah, as the manual said, there are 20 yellow, 20 white, and 20 RGB. So the LEDs are actually sort of offset. So I suppose the internal layout would have looked something like this, And that raises an interesting question. Why is it called the VL49? I mean, 49 implies that there are 7 by 7 LEDs or something along those lines, but no, there's 60 LEDs here, and you will never have a situation in which all of the LEDs are lit up at once, but no matter what you do, you can only get a maximum of 40 LEDs on at once. You'll never get 49. So that number is a little bit strange. None of this makes sense, but hey, it works, so I'm not going to question it too much. Another difference I discovered comes about with the battery and the heat it generates. On the VL15, the light gets really hot. I guess that's what happens when you pack a lot of things close together. I mean, it's not too hot to touch, it's about as hot as a camera gets, which, I don't know, for a light that might be a little bit too much. This gets worse if you're actually plugged in and charging it while using it, so you may not want to do that too much to prolong the battery life. When it comes to a VL49, thermals are a little bit better unless you're using the light at full intensity, which personally I don't find much need to do that unless I have the light quite far away, as in the case right now. As I said, I normally use these lights with Zoom calls, so at 60% intensity that's kinda good enough. I don't need too much of a bright blue light at the side of my face anyway. Anyway, some final differences to wrap things up. There are some things that are a little bit strangely missing from the more expensive model, the VL49. Firstly, it doesn't come with a diffuser when its little cousin does. I found that a little bit strange. But at the same time, we don't really need a diffuser. For the VL15, I use a diffuser more as a soft carrying case so I can just throw it in my bag and go out. Honestly, when I use it, I take the diffuser off anyway. So yeah, I guess it's not such a huge loss. And here's the interesting thing about the VL15, it has an animated color sweep option that you don't get with the more expensive VL49. The VL49 only ever gives you a static color, so that again is a little bit strange. Also, with the VL49, because it has intensity adjustments, you can sort of peer into how the whole color mixing actually works. Since to get an in-between color, we will have different colors at different intensities, what you'll find is that at lower intensities, there are just some colors that you cannot properly represent. They get so dim that they're just switched off entirely. So at a very low intensity, you'll find that as you switch through the colors, they don't change quite as smoothly as they do at higher intensities. Again, I don't think this is a problem you will encounter in practical usage, because in those cases, the intensities are really so low that they're not very useful. Anyway, I think you've heard me ramble long enough now. We've taken a very close look at each one of these devices, so it's finally time to answer the most important burning question, which is, should you buy these lights? And if yes, which one? Let's start by talking about the VL49 and who it's for. Well, turns out this is your best bet if you want a general purpose RGB video light. It's versatile. It works, you can dial in exactly what you want depending on your use case, which may change from day to day. It has a better battery life, which means you don't have to constantly be worried about topping it up. And it's not significantly less portable than a VL15. Sure, it's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit heavier, but to me, I don't see that as too much of an issue in most cases. It's also not significantly more expensive, especially if you buy from a third-party seller, who may make the prices much closer than they are officially. Of course, the official price of the VL49 is about double that of the VL15, but yeah, resellers tend to close the gap a little bit more. At least that's based on resellers I've seen. Of course, that's not to discount the VL15 as a product. If you have certain specific needs that rule out the VL49, then you can still consider the VL15 for a very competent little light. For example, if you really need something tiny. I mean, I've seen some mirrorless cameras today that, well, are really quite tiny, and with the VL49 it may look a little bit out of place. In such cases, maybe the VL15 is a better choice. If you're just going to use it as a little highlight light like I'm doing now with, the little purple light at the bottom, then yeah, maybe it's not so bad. And of course, the last important thing is if you want the animation. Unfortunately, the sweeping lights only happens for the VL15, not for the VL49, so if that's a feature you care about, then maybe the smaller light is the better choice. Of course, What I said was, if you had to choose one light, these are your options. If you want two lights, then the story is a little bit different. Now, I believe the official website does sell multiple lights together for a little bit cheaper, so keep an eye out for deals. Either way, if you're gonna get two lights, then you kind of have two possible routes to go in. I'll definitely recommend getting at least one VL49 just for its versatility, and if you realize your use case isn't going to change very much, then get two VL49s. You can get it for a discount. Their performance will be matched, you'll be able to configure them as you like, and I think more importantly when it comes to battery life, yeah, they're matched as well. Usually for me in Zoom calls, the smaller light gives up first and I sort of have to go with one less light. It's not a problem because I still have two lights. But yeah, if you don't want that happening, then get two lights that match each other. Of course, the alternative is to get one of each, which is the configuration I have. I think it affords the best amount of flexibility, especially if you're not going to use them all together at once. Nowadays, I bring out the VL15 more often. The VL49 is more or less mounted on my desk all the time. So again, yeah, this depends on your use case. So there you have it. That's two different lights for you to compare and choose between. Definitely get one because they're just fun to play with. They're so cheap that even if you don't sort of utilize them fully, you don't feel like you've lost a chunk of cash. They help contribute a little bit of extra flair to your video, and while I'm not fully convinced that my placement is perfect yet, it just gives me more room to be creative. It's useful for both video and stills photography, and yeah, basically it's just fun to have. So yeah, if you're in the market for an RGB light, you can consider these brands. I've personally had a blast using them and will continue to use them as long as they last. Anyway, I think I've rambled a whole bunch today, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, you're watching 0612 TV with NERDfirst.net. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video and are feeling generous, a donation to this channel will be greatly appreciated. There's a link on screen and in the video description for more details. Meanwhile, please do like, comment and subscribe. This helps the channel tremendously and gives me the means to do more. Thank you once again, and I'll see you next time.